All right, guys. When the role nearly destroys an actor's life.
There are some key differences
go.
between an actor and a method actor. An actor will do what they need to do to get the job done, and a method actor will suffer deep psychological torture to make you fully believe their role is their true identity. To prepare for a role, a good actor will stick to the basics.
Isn't Jared Leto a method actor?
Jared Leto? Pick up an intense workout regimen, or wear prosthetics like large noses or fat suits. They do what they need to do to look like they felt sad, happy, angry, or in pain. However, a method actor doesn't believe it's enough to just look like they have these emotions. They need to actually feel these emotions. And some method actors go to extreme lengths to make the performance perfect. From hitting themselves, to picking up a substance habit, to locking themselves in a dark room for a month to transform into a full-blown schizophrenic murderer. Unfortunately, the dedication to the role can have some drastic real-life consequences, with some method actors losing their sanity and potentially their lives for their art. Today we're going to discuss some of the all-time greats and the dark life of method acting, starting with Daniel Day-Lewis, who is arguably the king of the method. One of Daniel's most immersive performances was in the movie My Left Foot. Day-Lewis played Christy Brown, an Irish poet, writer, and painter with cerebral palsy.
Yeah, I know what age that's 10-year-old, same age as me.
Don't give him any more.
Where's Steve from them, Tony?
Touch it, and I'll kick you, the only part of your...
To prepare for this role, Day-Lewis spent most of his free time with kids suffering from cerebral palsy. He wanted to try his best to understand how they struggled and how they felt judged. By the time he arrived on set, Daniel Day-Lewis was completely immersed in his disabled character, and he wouldn't break character for anyone. Daniel's co-star, Kristen Sheridan, found it almost unbearable. He'd call you by your film name, and you'd call him Christy. It was madness. You'd be feeding him and wheeling him around. During the entire film, I only saw him walking once. Lewis's madness would pay off, as this role earned him his first Oscar for Best Actor a year later. However, this was not the end of method acting for Daniel Day-Lewis. He would continue to go to extreme lengths to embody these characters he was hired to portray, focusing on the smallest details that some might argue are not even necessary. For example, in his role as John Proctor in The Crucible, Day-Lewis built a 17th century house for himself only using mid-century tools. He built the rest of the set while remaining in costume the entire time, and he even lived in this replica home without running water or electricity for the duration of the film. As Hawkeye in The Last of the Mohicans, Day-Lewis would not eat anything unless he hunted it down himself in the Alabama wilderness. To Daniel Day-Lewis, method acting isn't really a choice. If he is not able to be a part of his character's world, he believes he won't be able to act at all.
I can't say for sure that it necessarily helps me or helps what I'm doing, but I believe that it does. I have a strong belief that it does, and that's really...
That's all that matters.
Yeah, that's all that matters. And beyond that, Charlie, I'd say that it's as much to do with this whole thing, the beginning of this, the life of any individual piece of work begins with a compulsion of some kind. And
writing,
necessarily
acting,
you share
directing.
that with the director, otherwise you might as well stay at home. You have a shared sense of urgency to tell that story. And this unleashes
He builds his own house and hunts for his own food. This is the man. Yeah, pretty much. Hey, he believes in the character. He believes in the role. I can't really judge them because at the end of the day, they may annoy people, but they're not hurting people, right?
a curiosity that it's very hard to satisfy. And that curiosity leads you into all kinds of strange and unknown places. It really seems to me to be part of the pleasure of that work. You explore that world, you discover it, you create it to some extent yourself. Why the hell not hang around there for a while?
By hanging around in these made-up worlds he created, Daniel has helped make some of the greatest movies in history, like Gangs of New York with Martin Scorsese, or Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood.
Louder, say it louder. I've abandoned my child! I've abandoned my child! I've abandoned my boy!
Although his approach to method acting has made him an industry legend, Day-Lewis's creative process takes an unimaginable toll on his health and well-being.
Well,
Between
yeah.
films, he's known to disappear for months or years before taking on another role, usually refusing to share what he's been doing during that time. He feels that the method is probably necessary for his acting. However, in his rare interviews, he has said that performing can be taxing, and it forces him to take breaks to stay grounded.
The way in which I'm able to enjoy the work most seems to mean
Oh,
that
that's
I then have
good.
to stay away from it for a while.
What Daniel
That makes
Day-Lewis is
sense.
describing is a common feeling among method actors. He was just lucky enough to strike a balance where he could always find himself again. Although for some actors, removing themselves from a role isn't so easy. Like when Jim Carrey basically
Jim
lost his
Carrey.
sanity and truly believed he was possessed by
Jim Carrey is one of like the method actors that I personally know. Would you guys consider? No, never mind. I was gonna say Jackie Chan consider method actor because he does his own stunts, but that's different. That's different. Many animals were hurt in the making of this film. It's like, bro. But hey, he ate them. It wasn't like they didn't waste the food. Because you know how much people in Hollywood waste food? It's crazy how much, because they can't eat while they're acting, right? Like when they're saying their lines, they can't eat the food. So they eat like maybe one little thing and that's it, and they throw away the rest of the food. It's fucking, oh my God. It's one of the most wasteful foods in our industry. Is like the Hollywood. They kind of changed that, by the way, guys. They fixed that where like they're doing that less of it now. That's why, like, I don't know if people notice, but there's not a lot of food, like food like areas in Hollywood as much anymore compared to like eating wise, because they're not wasting it. Especially when actors, what I've noticed, like there are not that many scenes like that anymore, especially with actors behind like the backdrop, whatever. You can see them probably eating, right? Because again, they're not saying any lines; they're probably just eating the food and all that. So, but yeah, I believe they fixed that a little bit.
by a dead artist named Andy Kaufman. But real quick, if you're busy but still want to eat real, high-quality meals without cooking or meal prep, Cook Unity is the way to go. And I want to thank them for sponsoring today's video. Cook Unity.
By the way, guys, people still believe that Hoffman, that's his name, right? The comedian is still alive.
Something more elevated, they have it.
I skipped it. You know what? You're right. I should watch it. I should watch the ad. That's the least I could do. I became
Thank them
LW.
for sponsoring today's video. Cook Unity
I
is
should
a
watch it. I should watch
chef-to-you
it.
meal delivery service that brings fresh, handmade meals from award-winning chefs right to your door. Each week, these chefs craft hundreds of globally inspired meals, from vegetarian to paleo and everything in between. Meals are delivered fresh, never frozen, and the menu rotates every week, so there's always something new to try. Their subscriptions are super flexible. You can pause, skip weeks, or cancel at any time. When I first tried Cook Unity, I had the gochujang pulled pork bao with banh mi slaw by Chef Fabiola Rivera.
Oh my God.
The pork was salty sweet, the buns were soft, and the slaw gave it that perfect crunch.
I don't eat pork
I
no
also
more.
had the Peruvian beef stir fry and the grilled chicken with carrot thyme puree, and both of them were delicious. You could actually taste the quality and care that went into these dishes. What stood out to me was how much variety there.
I'm gonna tell you guys, I had some of these before, not like from the same company, but I tell you guys, when you put these in the oven, oh my God, the food tastes so good. Had that stuff in the fridge. Yeah, so I found out that their new packaging, the company that KB got, they went lower quality with their packaging because I put it in the oven. Because back in the day, you could put this in the oven and cook it, right? Now I guess the way you have to do it is you thaw a little bit, you scoop it up, and you put it in a oven kind of thing or in an air fryer. That's the way you could cook it. Never put it in a microwave. It's never good in a microwave.
There is. Whether I wanted something classic like lasagna bolognese or something more elevated, they have it. And with new options rotating weekly, it never gets boring. Cook Unity's service works perfect for anyone like me that's busy working more than 40 hours per week. You can still eat a high-quality handmade dish that takes just a few minutes to prepare. If you want to eat better without the hassle, go to cookunity.com/patrickcc50 or click the link in the description. Use my code patrickcc50 to get 50% off your first order of chef-made meals delivered fresh to your door. In the 1990s, Jim Carrey became a comedy icon in Hollywood, starring in classics like The Mask, Dumb
Love
and
the
Dumber,
movie.
and
Love
The
the
Truman
movie.
Show. He
Love
had
the
become
movie.
a bigger star than most actors or comedians could possibly dream of. And while he might not have claimed to be a method actor, he often heavily immersed himself in most of his roles. Over time, he felt that identity was an illusion, and he was done playing a game he saw as completely meaningless.
It's not our world.
None
That's
of
the
this is
key.
real?
Nope.
So you're just passing
We don't
through?
matter. We don't matter.
Oh.
In fact, there was one specific role that made Carey realize he lost his sense of self, which was during the film Man on the Moon, a biopic about his idol, performance artist Andy Kaufman.
I don't know if you call it method acting or whatever. It's like he was gonna channel Andy Kaufman. He became Andy Kaufman for these 80 days that he was on the set we were filming this movie.
Calling Andy Kaufman a comedian feels like an oversimplification. He was an enigma. His entire career was basically an experiment in how far he could blur the lines between comedy, performance art, and real life. During one of his comedy sets, Kaufman started reading The Great Gatsby verbatim. No jokes, just reading it straight. When people started leaving or booing, he kept going. Totally deadpan, treating it as an actual performance. Andy even started wrestling women at his comedy shows. He'd trash talk women, say they belonged in the kitchen, and challenge them to real matches. He even created alter egos that became famous in pop culture. The most prominent one was irreverent lounge singer Tony Clifton.
Dude.
The character was a chronic smoker and drinker who would show up at random events or television shoots with prostitutes. To add to this confusing performance art, Andy Kaufman's longtime friend Bob Zmuda would often play Tony Clifton, making some people believe Clifton was a real person since Andy and Clifton would be in the same room at once. Kaufman also loved professional wrestling, mostly because of the art of kayfabe, which is the established practice where wrestlers and their storylines are presented.
Which honestly, a lot of kayfabe is dead now in wrestling. They no longer hide about what's real, what's fake at this point when it comes to like storylines and actual beef and etc. I personally feel like they kind of ruined wrestling a little bit in that kind of sense. They should just kept it, even though people know it. It's more of just like don't say it, just perform it. And I believe even WWE is gonna release a show on WWE or Netflix about the writer's room, which is like the most dumbest thing ever, in my personal opinion. But that's just me though.
Presented as real, even though they are staged performances. Kaufman's rivalry with Jerry Lawler was one that brought professional wrestling into the mainstream. Their commitment to kayfabe was so legendary that it made audiences believe they genuinely hated each other. After one fight with Lawler in the ring, Andy Kaufman spent 3 nights in the hospital, but he wasn't actually hurt badly. He could have left in a few hours. He committed to his fake injury to make their next stunt more shocking. Kaufman showed up to an interview with David Letterman wearing a neck brace. Then the two traded insults before Lawler slapped Kaufman and they broke out into a fight in front of a live studio audience. Now remember, Lawler and Kaufman were acting. They were actually friends in real life. Kaufman's performances confused people so much that when he died from lung cancer in 1984, a lot of fans believed his own funeral was just another prank. But Lawler and Kaufman remained so committed to their art that when Andy Kaufman died in real life, Lawler still remained in kayfabe.
But really, I'm not, I've had calls all week ever since, ever since Andy Kaufman did pass away. I've had calls from TV stations all across the country wanting to know my comments about Andy Kaufman's death. I'm really the wrong person to talk to about that. I didn't like Andy Kaufman. Andy Kaufman didn't like me. I'm sorry that the guy's dead, but I would think that, I always thought that when somebody dies, you talk to somebody that thought a lot of him. I hope that if I die, they don't interview Jimmy Hart, because, I can imagine what he's going to say about it.
From the outside, Lawler's comments about Kaufman seem extremely harsh, but this is exactly what Kaufman would have wanted. To portray Andy Kaufman in a movie would take every ounce of focus that Jim Carrey had, and it was about to destroy him.
I think it's been a long process.
Yeah, I saw that film, dude. Good film.
Get caught up in the story because the story's compelling sometimes, but it was definitely an important moment in the process where I found myself subjugating Jim Carrey for Andy Kaufman and Tony Clifton, and then at the end of it, looking for Jim Carrey again and having trouble finding him. And at a certain point, I realized, hey, wait a second, you know, if it's so easy to lose Jim Carrey, who the hell is Jim Carrey?
Carrey lost his identity before the cameras even started rolling. He recalls lounging on a Malibu beach when he heard he got the part. After the news set in, Carrey looked at the ocean and thought, where would Andy be? What would he be doing right now? He actually assumed Andy would be trying to communicate telepathically, so he tried to. Immediately, he says 30 or so dolphins surfaced, and then Andy showed up, tapped him on the shoulder, and said, sit down, I'll be doing my movie. What happened afterwards, Carrey adds, was out of my control. To Jim Carrey, Andy Kaufman wasn't just another role. He was everything Carrey admired as a human being and an artist. By the time production started for Man on the Moon in the late 90s, Carrey fully believed that Andy Kaufman had a paranormal control over his mind and body. I didn't black out, but the balance was way in Andy's corner. I broke a couple of times on weekends and stuff, but pretty much from when I woke up to when I went to bed, the choices were all his. Some of Carrey's methods were simple. He only responded when people called him Andy, and he behaved like him at all times.
Impression, Johnson County.
But then he started taking it much further. Carrey threw temper tantrums like Andy, showed up late and drunk to set like Andy, refused to say his lines like Andy.
Bro, it was bro, if you watch the behind the scenes, I've been made a documentary about this film too, by the way. Like behind the scenes of this, bro, I recommend watching it, man. It is one of the weirdest, craziest things I've seen. I feel like he was a lot of drugs in the 90s. It felt that way, but I don't think he was. I think he was a method actor, because when he took on the role, he really took a lot of energy to make that role happen on all the characters he like took on.
And he even disrespected and talked back to
him being on drugs
like Andy sometimes did.
I know he was drunk. He drank a lot.
To hang out with Carrey's version of Andy Kaufman and his alter egos for the next 4 months, which led to some of the cast feeling like Carrey was a total nightmare to deal with.
Man on the Moon. Oh, it was challenging. It was not easy. You know, he was great, but it was tricky. You know, because it was sometimes hard to just kind of fit yourself around what he was doing. What was going on off camera was more insane than the actual movie.
So it's Jim Carrey playing Andy Kaufman, who's playing Tony Clifton?
Tony Clifton, yeah. So it was like, whenever he was Tony Clifton, it was particularly mayhem. Yeah, browbeating everybody, and he was walking around with stinky cheese in his pockets, and he was smearing stinky cheese on people. When he'd hug you, he'd be like, give me a hug, give me a hug. And he would he's stinking and
who pushed back the hardest? Who said, get the off me?
I don't know that anybody did. That was the thing, is that it was such a fucking weird assault that I think people you were so kind of stunned, deer in the headlights, that you couldn't really tell them to off. We're just like, okay, because it was just sort of, it just occupied the whole room.
Jim was so unbearable that Universal refused to let the behind-the-scenes footage get released because they didn't want the world to think that Jim Carrey was an asshole.
The very first time I saw him, we're on the set of Universal Studios, and all of a sudden I see, bam! This big glass bottle of juice or orange juice or something comes flying through the air, almost hits me, and I'm like, what the heck? And I look over, and there's Jim Carrey, dressed as Andy Kaufman. He says, I'll get you, Lawler! And then he runs inside the trailer.
On more than one occasion, Carrey actually hung out with Andy's real family on the set while portraying their deceased son, providing anyone still grieving Andy's loss with closure. He even got in contact with Andy Kaufman's daughter, who never met him, to give her the chance to say, I love you. Luckily, the family was supportive of this, with
That's
Kaufman's
weird.
sister saying he wasn't being shticky when he was being Andy with us. He was almost trying to give us a gift. At the time, Jim's performance was controversial. Critics, cast, and crew were unsure if Jim was just doing what was necessary to accurately, artistically represent Andy Kaufman, or if he was just kind of being a dick. Unfortunately, Jim Carrey is far from the only actor to push things a bit too far. Some actors embracing the method lose control almost entirely, creating performances that cause serious harm. Like when Val Kilmer decided to transform into the Lizard King of rock and roll and was accused of giving Andy lifelong trauma.
Yeah,
Val Kilmer was one of the most famous action movie stars in the business, starring in massive hits.
I believe he was the lead actor of the Doors, right? Which like the real life of the Doors singer had like a very troubled life, and he had like a weird style the way he sing, but he was like a big drug addict.
Hits like Top Gun and Tombstone, but nothing could have prepared Kilmer for his role as Jim Morrison. Morrison was the frontman of The Doors, a 1960s band fueled by sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But like a lot of artists at the time, the drugs got the best of him, and he always had a difficulty holding it together.
I'd like to do a song that, or a piece of music that's just a pure expression of joy, the coming of spring, or the sun rising, something like that. Just pure, unbounded joy.
As a rock musician, Jim Morrison is seen as one of the greats, making legendary songs like Light My Fire, Riders on the Storm, and Break On Through to the Other Side. However, his behavior on and off the stage was unhinged and reckless. During a performance in Miami, Morrison was charged with indecent exposure, shouting profanity and exposing himself to the audience. When confronted about this, or anything else, Morrison just didn't care. He never took advice from anyone. He refused to change, even for his friends and family. His drug use became more excessive, and he was known to have violent episodes where he'd turn on band members or girlfriends. There was one incident where a fight escalated so much that Morrison allegedly held a knife to one of his groupies. But Morrison achieved a level of status that made him immune to criticism. He was so famous that people still defended his behavior as typical rock star antics.
You know, he told me, like, you know, you'd be at a party, like, and it'd be the most beautiful chicks and the best drugs, and everyone's like feeling it, and then Jim Morrison would show up, shove someone down the stairs, and then go lay in the street until the cops come. He goes, "That's bullshit," you know. He like fuck up the whole scene, and I was like, kind of cool. I mean, it's kind of punk.
Morally aligned or not, nobody deserves to go the way Jim did, as Morrison's drug habits sadly got
They're
the
just
best
like making excuses for him right there, you
him,
know.
and he died at the age of 27 of cardiac arrest.
Crazy,
To become
27.
Jim Morrison, Kilmer locked himself away and memorized 50 songs from The Doors to perfect his voice, which is a major feat considering most actors just lip sync in fear of doing something wrong. Kilmer then dressed like Jim, walked like him, and moved like him for months until he matched his mannerisms perfectly. But to capture Jim Morrison's unpredictable behavior, Val Kilmer felt that he had to embrace everything that Morrison was, and this took a really dark turn, especially when it came to how Kilmer captured Morrison's controversial relationships with women.
Val, how did you survive the making of this movie? Because really it was as much as a survival as just being an actor, with all the things you had to go through.
Yeah. Movies usually are about endurance. Prayer, drinking that carrot juice. I didn't get seduced into his style of living, but had to and needed to for the role to be as disciplined as he was in these escapades. He was a very disciplined drinker as much as he was disciplined artist. I mean, he was looking for inspiration every second of the day.
Meg Ryan said it kind of got to her after a few months a little bit, the darkness and just the...
Well, I too, I'm provoking. She's getting hammered, so that hurts. You know, as much as it hurt to do it, it hurts to be under, you know, someone calls you 20 years, you start flinching.
In the wake of the Me Too movement, former actress Caitlin O'Heaney made some serious allegations about her experience auditioning for the role, saying Val Kilmer physically assaulted her while everyone around stood and watched it like it was normal. During the audition, Kilmer unexpectedly struck me in the face and knocked me to the ground. When I got to the room, Val Kilmer picked me up and shaked me, throwing me down to the floor. Stone just stood there the whole time, laughing. Some of the crew have rejected O'Heaney's claims, like casting director Bramon Garcia, who said O'Heaney and all other actresses were warned that they would be reading a volatile scene that could result in physical contact. I remember there was a moment Val
she was warned.
All part of the scene.
But even if she was warned, it's like you still don't expect you as you get hit. Like, you know?
She explained, adding that she immediately stopped the scene before it got carried away. But others still see it as suspicious considering O'Heaney went to the police right after the incident, making a formal report. And the fact that Stone and Kilmer reached a settlement outside of court makes things a little more suspicious. Because of his dedication to the immersive performance, rumors have circulated that Kilmer needed therapy after the role. And if this happens to be true, he's not alone. Replacing one one identity for another, especially for long periods of time, often has a price. There's actually a science behind why people have trouble finding their sense of self after becoming another person. In a study called Becoming a Character, Dissociation in Conservatory Acting Students, psychologists attempted to
You know, that's some streamers today. That is some streamers today. He's dead, can't cancel him. Oh yeah, I forgot he died. I forgot about that. But no, that was like years, like when the Me Too movement was happening. When he was still alive, I believe. But yeah, this right here, that's some streamers right now. Some streamers are so into their character, it comes into the real world, right? Especially because now they're like, ever since like the invention of IRL streaming, right? When that started and what it is now, they believe they're that character. They don't know if they're just playing as a streamer or as the person. Because when the camera's off, most of these people on stream change. Like they change who they are because they're playing a character, right? We've seen that happen time and time again. Because again, nobody really knows how the person is off camera. I think I'm the same off camera. Shadow, you met me in person, right? And I can say that. I'm pretty much the same person. Am I right? Right? I am not fake.
discover the impacts of method acting and what it does to the human brain, using the Dissociative Experiences Scale, DES-2, measuring the disconnect between the mind and reality. Giving the test to actors before and after 6 months of training, doctors found that, although no significant changes occurred over time, acting students scored significantly higher than the general population on the DES-2, showing traits that psychologists find when looking for psychopathy. And while this doesn't mean actors are psychopaths, it does mean they are entering a sort of flow state that can lead to psychopathic tendencies. In theory, given enough time, this proves people can lose their identities to the point where they believe they are someone else. What's interesting is that this same phenomenon was found in law enforcement officers who have to go undercover. In a study conducted at Cedarville University, an investigation into undercover policing revealed that most cops are ordered to stay in character for long periods of time. In criminal organizations, they witness horrible crimes, heists, and even murder. Yet this isn't what cops have trouble forgetting when they finally go back to normal life. In fact, investigators found that the two main stressors cops experience after undercover work don't even have to do with violence, but loss of identity and reintegration into society. As a result, the study showed that almost half of cops going undercover can't fully rejoin society after being someone else, and those who have a chance to rebuild often refuse help from health professionals to protect their careers. You can imagine the difficult choice these method actors have to face. Stay in character and lose your sanity, or go to therapy and admit that you lost your identity acting. It takes a deep psychological toll on those who do it, which is especially dark when you consider they are mostly doing it for the good of others. James Gandolfini is another legendary method actor who went to unimaginable lengths, like intentionally causing himself physical pain, just to convince you he was a ruthless mob boss. James Gandolfini changed how people looked at organized crime when he was selected to star in The Sopranos, a series that made HBO a household name. It was a story about an Italian crime family in New Jersey, created by writer and director David Chase. In order to grab the audience's attention, Chase felt that The Sopranos star
watching The Sopranos first time did blow my mind.
Had to be a badass.
It was a couple years ago.
To do this, he came up with a leading character named Tony Soprano, a soon-to-be mob boss who embodied the spirit of an old-school American man, trying to fit into U.S. society after the country was in decline. When James Gandolfini auditioned for the role, it was love at first sight. He left in the middle of the first audition, Chase recalled, but we thought he was great. So our casting directors got him to come to my house and he read the scene. And it was like, you know, bang. But Chase had no idea what lengths the actor would go to bring Tony Soprano to life. James Gandolfini's co-star Michael Imperioli, who played Tony's nephew, Christopher Moltisanti, described his first real experience with James' method in an interview on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Like anything, you start to see what you have, like what are these actors bringing, you know, what are they playing to their strengths and what kind of qualities they're bringing to it. You know, just like there's that one scene in the pilot where at the end, towards the end of the pilot, and my character tells Tony Soprano, oh, I could go to Hollywood and sell my story or something. And he, in the script, it was kind of, he was like fatherly, like, you don't want to do that and sell out. You got to stay with us and build a family or whatever. And instead, Jim just grabs me, you know, by the throat or something like that. And it became very menacing and very intimidating. And he really, you know, and I think David saw that. Was
Holy
like, oh,
shit.
wow, that's the guy. That's the character. That, and it probably influenced how he took the story and how he would write it. But I think a lot of the tone was already in his head. But seeing what the actors were bringing to it, I think.
Imagine doing a scene and then like it goes to like off script. You're like, holy shit, bro, what the fuck you doing? Like grabbing your throat and everything. Like, holy.
You know, influenced a lot.
Gandolfini's presence on screen as Tony demanded your attention. He could be calm and quiet during a conversation, only to become explosive and merciless a second later, especially during therapy sessions with co-star Lorraine Bracco as Dr. Melfi.
So you no. You let me sit there.
Please sit down.
How the am I supposed to trust you? You're my doctor.
Please sit down. You're scaring me. You've been drinking.
Why the didn't you help her?
Sometimes you can't.
I bet you charged her enough, didn't you, huh? I bet you didn't cut her a deal because you're incompetent.
He was vulnerable, sensitive, ruthless, and cunning all at the same time. The method acting started with the typical tactics. He'd walk around in the set in his character's bathrobe with a mean attitude or interact with actors as if they were in a scene. But as the drama continued throughout the series, Tony Soprano's crimes and behavior would get darker, and Gandolfini did everything he could to match that energy before filming. If Tony was binge eating to cope with inner pain, he would do the same. And to capture physical pain or Tony's anger perfectly, the actor would deliberately drive himself into a rage, hitting himself on the head or depriving himself of sleep. Drink 6 cups of coffee, he said, describing his technique, or just walk around with a rock in your shoe. It's silly, but it works. In an HBO documentary about The Sopranos titled Wise Guy, David Chase and The Sopranos, Michael Imperioli describes the real Gandolfini saying, he was very different than Tony Soprano. He was very laid back, he wore Birkenstocks and liked Green Day and AC/DC. What's funny is that a lot of fans look at Tony Soprano as kind of a role model, which is very scary in a lot of ways.
That should never be a role model.
People thinking he's Tony Soprano, and
he should never be a role model.
Gandolfini's method acting evolved to the point where he would do anything to make his acting believable, even if it had real-life consequences. James Gandolfini had on and off issues with substance abuse before The Sopranos started. He would drink heavily and was known to smoke constantly. Portraying Tony made things worse. Gandolfini had lost control, often being late to work high on that booger sugar or extremely drunk. HBO's chairman and CEO at the time, Chris Albrecht, talked about the chaos, saying, eventually the cast and crew tried to have an intervention with the actor. He walked in, saw everyone sitting there and was like, oh, F this, and he walked out. Albrecht recalled that Gandolfini said, fire me. The method would continue to destroy Gandolfini inside and out. It's hard to definitively say that method acting was the main cause, but the stress obviously leaked into Gandolfini's personal life. In 2002, his addiction got so bad that his wife filed for divorce. 3 years later, he failed to appear for the Golden Globes as a presenter, where he was later found severely drunk and making snow angels in front of his hotel, even though there wasn't any snow on the concrete beneath him. Any fan of The Sopranos can't deny that James Gandolfini's method acting was great, and the HBO masterpiece would have never grown into a billion-dollar asset without Tony Soprano as the main character.
Bro, this guy was on it, on the drug, dude.
Dedication into a role can tear your real life apart. But whenever the topic of method acting comes up, there is a role that must be included in the conversation.
Which one?
That is Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight, which is easily one of the greatest method acting performances in Hollywood history, one that many suspect actually led to Ledger's early death. Heath Ledger was becoming a major Hollywood star, acting in well-known films like 10 Things I Hate About You, The Patriot, A
I know that
Knight's
one.
Tale, and
I know that
Brokeback
one.
Mountain.
I never
As
seen
his
that one.
career was reaching new heights, director Christopher Nolan reached out to see if Ledger would star in his new Batman trilogy. Not as the Joker, but rather billionaire Bruce Wayne in Batman Begins, before the role was ultimately given to Christian Bale. Surprisingly, Heath Ledger wanted nothing to do with the project, politely declining the offer because he failed to see Nolan's vision for the film. To Ledger, the idea of being part of a superhero franchise didn't seem fulfilling. In fact, when an interview asked him if he ever considered being a superhero before, he said, "Not really. With the tights and undies and the boots, I would just feel stupid and silly. I couldn't pull it off, and there are other people who can perfectly, but I just couldn't take myself seriously." But all of that would change when Ledger saw Batman Begins on screen. Sitting in the theater, he realized that Nolan's Batman story wasn't like other comic book adaptations. It was more edgy and dark. And when Ledger learned that the sequel, The Dark Knight, needed someone to...
So at the time, what films were coming out? Why would he think that? Oh, right. It was X-Men, Spider-Man, like the beginning. Fantastic Four. I believe Iron Man was around that time too, right? So yeah, I think around that time he was right, where like the comic book movies were like not as serious. But was the Dark Knight? Wait, when did the Dark Knight came out? Or actually Batman Begins? Let's see, when did Batman Begins came out? In 2005. When did Spider-Man 2 came out? Hold up. Spider-Man 2. 2004. So I think like if he saw Spider-Man 2, he would have like seen like more potential of superheroes films, in my personal opinion. Because I personally believe to this day, X-Men 2, Spider-Man 2, and The Dark Knight is one of the best superhero films of all time. And also Captain America, The Winter Soldier. I said that wrong. Those are some of the best superhero films of all time. Like they go into deep into like the character and the development and their crisis, etc. Iron Man 2 could have been that, but the story wasn't it. Because Iron Man 2 was pretty much like the addiction of Iron Man, like him being an alcoholic and stuff like that, which had a big potential being a great story, but they really kind of dropped the ball in that film.
To play the Joker, Batman's insane arch nemesis, suddenly he needed to be a part of the film no matter what. To become the Joker, Heath Ledger locked himself in a hotel room for over a month. In isolation, he studied the materials that Christopher Nolan gave him and constantly worked on the character's posture, voice, and dark psychology. To bring it to another level, he also made entries into the infamous Joker Diary, which included sinister writing, manic scribbles, and disturbing pictures. Some pages had references to Stanley Kubrick's Clockwork Orange, a movie about psychopaths and abuse. There was a photo of a hyena to develop his signature laugh. Ledger even made a list titled Things That Made Me Laugh, where he wrote blind babies, landmines, AIDS, beloved pets in road accidents, statistics, pencil cases, brunch, and the periodic table of elements. The journal was packed with things that might have had him condemned to a mental institution if it weren't made for a movie.
We looked at paintings by Francis Bacon, visual reference, we looked at all kinds of things, talked about all kinds of different philosophical ideas behind the Joker and anarchy and chaos and what he would represent. And Heath was just ready to do it. He was ready to do something that big.
During filming, Ledger had immersed himself so deeply into the role that even his cast members could not help but be a little apprehensive. He'd look at the diary to tap into his foreign personality and then bring that intensity into every scene. Ledger even told Christian Bale not to hold back when hitting him during fight scenes, which freaked Bale out because he had been training his body to look like a lethal weapon. He was kinda egging me on. I was saying, you know what? I don't need to hit you. It's going to look just as good if I didn't. And he's going, go on, go on, go on. He was slamming himself around, and there were tiled walls inside of that set which were cracked and dented from him hurling himself into them. When people finally saw the Batman movie, most of the audience didn't even know
one of
there
them
was Heath
too?
Ledger behind the
Is
mask
one of
of
who?
paint. He turned into
Gotta-
something truly evil.
Oh,
willing to
that's
destroy
true. That's
the world
true.
just for the fun of it. Ledger's
Yeah, actually, that's right. Christian Bale did a film called. It was when he was a murderer, right? When he got really, really skinny or something like that. What was the film called? It was a boxer. No, it was not just a boxer. It was something else too. He played as a murderer. Let me see. American Psycho. Yeah, it was American Psycho. That's when he did that one. Yeah. That's the one that I know him being like a method actor was American Psycho.
Portrayal of the Joker is so damn good that every other actor who plays the comic book villain almost looks like they're trying to do an impression of him. And after The Dark Knight's release in
Joker on
2008,
Phoenix,
Heath Ledger's work had finally paid off, securing.
You know the craziest thing about the Joker on Phoenix Joker? That Joker's officially been tainted because of the sequel of that film. Nobody gives a shit about that Joker anymore.
Over $1 billion at the worldwide box office, it's considered to be the greatest Batman film of all time. Now, we have covered extensively in this video
we're gonna bring him
about
back
how
too,
many
but
of
he
the great
died.
method actors lose themselves, their sanity, and often turn to substances to cope with the psychological torture. Therefore, many just assumed that Ledger was dealing with the exact same thing. After all, his preparation for this role was just as immersive and dedicated as the previous actors I mentioned. However, one key mistake Ledger made was jumping right into another film role after The Dark Knight called The Imaginarium of Dr. Panarsis. And we know the best way to find balance in this brutal world of method acting is to take time off and recalibrate before jumping into a new identity. Tragically, before the movie's release in 2009, the 28-year-old actor was found dead in his Manhattan apartment. On his nightstand was a new prescription and a bottle of pills.
28,
Heath
guys.
Ledger's death was revealed to be an accidental overdose, but that wasn't a good enough explanation for the people who
28.
felt like they lost a living legend.
28,
Rumors
dude.
circulated about whether or not he lost his mind after The Dark Knight. Fans and journalists cited something Ledger had said in a New York Times profile while the movie was still in production. It is a physically and mentally draining role. Nolan's Joker is a psychopathic, mass-murdering, schizophrenic clown with zero empathy. This rumor became fact in the court of public opinion that the Joker role killed Heath Ledger. However, the truth was Ledger had been dealing with insomnia years before the Batman trilogy existed. To try and sleep, Ledger would take a lethal cocktail of prescription medications including Oxycontin, Vicodin, Valium, Xanax, Unisom, and Risterol. Heath's own sister reportedly told him in private, "You can't mix drugs that you don't know anything about." Today, people debate whether or not Ledger would still be with us if he did not take on the role as the Joker. Now, I'm no doctor or medical professional, so we can't.
No, I think if he didn't do it, something else would have taken. I think what he should have done is figure out like take a break from filming. I mean, because he's an actor that had a bright future, so it's like they were, especially after the film of the Joker. It's like just leave for a year or so, take a whole break, find peace within yourself, find a place where you can relax and sleep, right? Because the two important things in life is eating and sleeping. Believe it or not, finding balance with those two things are like very important because that's where it gives our health and keep things going. So I think he just in general just needed a break from everything.
Can't definitively say that this role was the reason for his early passing, but because of what we know about the deep psychological ramifications of method acting, combined with a toxic combination of prescription pills, it was a tragic disaster waiting to happen.
Pretty much. Yeah, that's pretty much but I mean, like this crazy thing about the
There
artist
are some
thing.
key differences between an actor and a method actor.
Hold up, sorry. Easily you could make a part 2 of this film for sure. Add Christian Bell, Jamie Foxx, or like a lot of some of these actors in here. Because there are way more actors that do the crazy method acting, dude. Everybody that Ledger's family, especially his sister, should get louder mics for them. Constantly reminding everyone that he's sort of almost on his way before the Dark Knight. Yeah, like to show the Joker changed the way the comic book Joker is depicted. He was so good that he affected the source material. Yeah, actually, that's true to a certain extent. Yeah, that's sort of like kind of pretty much true. They changed it up a little bit. A lot of people say method actors are just assholes, but at the end of the day, they pump out some of the most iconic performances. Yeah, when Kristen Bell is telling you to ease up on the roll, you know you done went over the cliff. Let's see. I'm in school in a PhD Academy of Theater, and I can't wait to show my class of this video because there's a debate about effectiveness of method acting. It's scary wanting to get there, to reach the darkness, embrace it, survive it, portray it, but I truly feel there's something only the best actors can only truly do, as long as you find your way home back to you. I think if you want to do like projects like these, or do like something going to the world like this, you have to take breaks. If you don't, holy shit, dude. Holy.